Hey friends, welcome back to So Here's the Thing. This week we are being joined by the lovely, beautiful, talented Kadie Smith of Drop Cap Design. Kadie is a traveling art director and brand strategist. She builds strategic and magnetic identities for modern brands. And she's also an incredible educator. She's got amazing programs for people who want to learn more about design and a lot of other things. But what we're going to talk about this week is Kadie actually hosted her first retreat in Costa Rica in late 2024, and I attended it, which was amazing because if you've been around for a while, you know that as an event host, I always love attending things, but it's rare that I get to. And so I really, really loved being an attendee. And so I wanted to talk to Kadie all about her experience hosting her first event, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it in between. But before we dive into that, Kadie, I'd love for you to share with our audience a little bit about you, how you got started, and why you wanted to host a retreat in the first place, in conjunction with your brand and your business.
Yeah. So I moved from Montana to Costa Rica almost 2 years ago. And I had been visiting before that and loved it. It's just a really beautiful place. It was a break from the winter. I really found my creativity and a lot of inspiration being in Costa Rica. And I would started talking about it a lot in my weekly newsletter, the Sunday edition. And people were messaging me back, "Oh, I'm coming to Costa Rica. I want travel tips," or "I want to experience that," or "Oh, it must be so nice to be able to take your work wherever." And the funny thing is that I kept coming back to the same place, this little surf town called Playa Negra, but I'm nowhere close to a travel expert on Costa Rica. So my travel tips were non-existent. And my boyfriend at the time, now fiance, which is crazy to say.
I love it.
He is a couples and individuals counselor and started a life coaching business in the spring. And before that, he had been the manager of a yoga retreat center in town. And I would always go up to the retreat center, see people who were on retreats. And it just looked really, this is just the place for it. Costa Rica is the perfect place to host a wellness retreat. And I started thinking it would be really fun to bring some people from my audience down here. I've never facilitated an event. I've always been behind the screen. I've always been one-on-one. And once he went off on his own, it's okay, we can do this together. So let's co-host something. And one of our closest friends in town is a photographer. She is also the best coordinator, which I know you know.
She's amazing.
So as soon as I even mentioned the idea at sunset one day, she had sent me, by the time I got home, an itinerary, a sample budget spreadsheet, some potential messaging. She pushed it forward. And I think I was just motivated by her enthusiasm, Addison's enthusiasm, seeing people wanting to hear more about Costa Rica in the newsletter. And I was let's just try it. And it was great. Half of the spots sold within the first 2 days, which is crazy.
I love that. That's the dream, right? You have the idea and then you're oh, people actually want it.
Yeah. And then it's oh, okay. So people actually want this. We need to make this happen. And I'm such a perfectionist that I immediately went into planning mode. And it's so funny to do something that you're not an expert at and try to be perfect at it the first time because it's just impossible. But the process of putting it together was amazing.
Oh, I love that so much. I feel so many people can relate to that, whether it's they want to share their skill set or they want to share their new home or there's something unique or special that they want other people to experience. And that being the heart of why you would want to open it up for people to come and experience it, I think is a great motivator, Not that there's a wrong motivator, but I love that one in particular. And as somebody who experienced it, I very much appreciate it because it was very unique and cool. And we'll talk about the retreat as well because it was amazing. It was unique. It was challenging. I'm getting ahead of myself.
For a lot of reasons.
I know. When I think about it, I'm still I can't believe I went to Costa Rica for that. That was crazy. I love that you had this idea. Your actual business is very different, right, than the retreat that you had planned. So in your business right now, what does that look like for you? Because I know that you have your agency, you have your programs. What's the general outline of your business look like?
So there's a portion of my business that's the traditional like branding agency model. We do brand identities and websites, design work. My background's in editorial design. So I also do a lot of like magazine spreads, that kind of thing. And then I have some branding courses, the brand edit, and then I have the studio edit on building your business. And then I have a couple more courses that are like in the works. I would say last year that was like the main differentiator. And then I do some consulting and like reviews. But the retreat was more focused on the health and wellness of the business owner. And the concept behind it, when Addison and I were talking, is I work so much in helping people craft identities for their business. And we never get to the point of helping someone understand who they are as a person, like the identity of the person. And where that becomes a huge disconnect in the branding space is that people don't know what their values are. And so I'll tell someone like, oh, what are the values of the brand? And they'll just like spew out some of like the most standard ones, but you don't know why those are your values. They don't actually impact the brand at all because they don't show up everywhere. So we wanted a retreat where it was more of an alignment with vision, a little bit more releasing some of the blocks so that people could show up as their best self for them and for their business and client, and also really understand what they value and what they stand for. Because as an online entrepreneur, your business is you in a lot of ways. Like there's no way to like really disconnect the two.
I think that's so interesting to hear, one, kind of like what your business is in conjunction to like what the retreat plan and vision were, because for those people listening and thinking like, oh, maybe this is something I want to do, it's so interesting for me as a retreat host because my business looks very different and the vision for my retreat is very different. And I think that that just goes to show that a lot of times people who are trying to get into hosting their first event or bringing people together, they see it as, well, I have to do this because so and so does this. And it's like, no, we both have retreats that sell well, that do well, and they're completely different for maybe even the same person. And maybe the same person would love both. I say maybe, like I do love both, you know? So I think that's really interesting as well. And I need to have you come back on the show and talk about design and brand, because you like skimmed over kind of like, well, what you do. And it's like, no, guys, she's so cool. Like you're so talented. You have so much to offer in that regard too. So I feel like I've got to stay focused on this topic, but I could go so far into that. And you mentioned Addison and the vision for it. So Addison's your fiance and he co-hosted it with you, correct? Like he led a lot of the sessions. So what did that look like for you in the planning when you were thinking about it? How did you decide what he would take, what you would take? What was your initial like thought process with that?
Well, it started off pretty easily in the fact that he's actually a yoga instructor and I
And
am.
he's so good.
So I easily passed off the yoga sessions to him because I don't even know the terminology. So it would have been really painful for me to lead those. And then as we started talking about it, we had like a couple of directions it could take. And the first time I put together the curriculum and showed it to him, he was like, no, that is not going to work. It was jam packed with like business workshops the whole day. And he was really good. I relied on him a lot because of his experience managing a yoga retreat center for so long, in that he saw good retreats and bad retreats and had a lot of insight on what, from his perspective, like what made something good or bad or successful or not successful. And he said one of the things is like, if you jam pack the schedule, people have no space to make it their own. Like it's exhausting. And he said, you have to think they're not coming to like get a certification. They're not coming to like leave with something like fully fleshed out. They're wanting to experience Costa Rica, feel better by the end, and like have an experience, but don't try to prove yourself by like making it fully packed from like the moment they wake up to the moment that they exhaustedly put their head down. So we took out the business workshops because I also did not know who was going to sign up. And we opened it up very early on. We opened it up to like, you can bring your partner to this or a friend, or it doesn't have to be solo. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is just because traveling out of the country can be a big expense. And, if you're going to be there, we're going to have space for it also to be a vacation, then yeah, bring your person. That'd be fun. So because of that, making it align for business was going to be really hard, but the personal development side was going to be a lot more universal and easy to apply to everybody. And also, I'm pretty introverted. So I have like a short social battery. I also am really good one on one. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do one on one business sessions. We're going to do some group personal identity work, and then we'll do yoga. And then if throughout we see that there's like a greater need for something, we have space to add it in. So we wanted a little bit of like a flexible schedule that we could tailor it to the needs of the first group and be able to pivot. And one of the unexpected things of the retreat that we did not even factor in because we thought it was such a guarantee was the weather, which changed the dynamic of the retreat fully,
Yeah.
like completely. We talked about it afterwards where I was like, what do you think it would have been like if it would have been like true dry season like it was supposed to be? He was like, it would have been on the beach. It would have been a lot more like photos, Instagram, exploration. And because we ended up with a massive tropical storm the whole time, it was reflective, contemplative, a lot more personal development work, a lot more of like just sitting small groups and talking. It's as much as you like plan and think that you have like this fully fleshed out idea of what it's going to be. You're also just working with, the universe.
Yeah. For context, guys, like I was one of the plus ones. Okay. So my designer, Sarah Erickson of Sarah Ann Design, who all the podcast listeners who have been around, you've met her many times. She has followed Kadie and Dropcat for a long time. And so when this retreat came up, she was like, hey, do you want to be my plus one and go to Costa Rica? And as my listeners know, and as you now know, I always try to go to something that I'm not hosting once or twice a year. I had already done one. It was a total bust. Hated it. So I was like, okay, well, I already hated the one I went to. Let's go to this one and give it a try. So I signed up. I get there. It is pouring rain from like the second I'm there. We're there for a full week. In fact, I got trapped there for an extra like 24 hours, 30 hours, something like that. And I mean, it was pouring, but for a retreat, I actually like didn't hate it because it was cozy. Like you said, a lot of time for talking. Whereas I think I may have been in the ocean like from sun up to sundown if it weren't pouring rain. So it kind of worked out, but it was also, I'm sure, much different than what you had planned.
Oh my gosh, completely different. And I was like, oh, everyone's going to want their afternoons to like, go lay on the beach, get a tan. And then all of a sudden you have a tropical storm. And it's like, no, everyone is still in the same spot, just talking with each other. But it created such a bond between all of you guys and also with me that like was so unexpected and wonderful and like little breakouts. And yeah, it ended up being like exactly what it needed to be, but very different from like what I had originally thought it was.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it was like night and day, but I loved it. And I also really enjoyed that you just brought up that you're great one on one. And so being able to incorporate that into the schedule, that's something that, like, at the next level retreat, which is mine, I end up doing like a decent amount of one on one, but it's like organic. But I never thought to like schedule it in. And I'm like, you know what? I might have to do that. I love that you did that. I thought it was really nice that people knew that they would get time with you, especially those who came for you. You know what I mean? Like, it's different for the plus ones, but you were generous enough to do one on one with me. And that was really fun and helpful to me. And so I think that knowing that that was in the schedule was really cool and also pretty unique, I think, to a creative retreat. You said that you had like your first iteration of the schedule. Addison was like, nah, girl, like chill, take it easy. And then he probably came back. You guys probably went back and forth on that. What else was like surprising to you in the process, like the planning process? And then also, what are some of like the top things that were a surprise when you're actually hosting, with it being the first time you've done it?
So, in the planning process, part of what surprised me is co-hosting in and of itself is just different because like when it's just you have so much control, like your ideas become concrete. When you're co-hosting, you're also working in the ideas and priorities of somebody else. And in my case, two other people. And just a little bit of like what all was included. It was, daily yoga. We had almost daily breakout group sessions. Then we had one on one business coaching, one on one personal development coaching with Addison. And then everyone had a photo shoot with Rachel. What it reminded me of was summer camp when you made your schedule at the beginning of the week and you like filled out all your little slots. It kind of felt like that to me, where there was like a lot of one on one things going on simultaneously. It wasn't like all group stuff. But what I did not anticipate before, I kind of felt the one on one sessions would be just kind of like an add on. The one on ones were where all of the biggest breakthroughs happen. So, like by the end of the week, everybody, their big thing was, oh, I uncovered this in my one on one with Addison, or oh, we had this idea together in our one on one business, or oh, I got to do this really cool thing during my photo shoot. Like some of the girls got to take photos with the wild horses on the beach, which is really cool.
They got to. They literally demanded. They were
Yeah,
like,
they were like, "I
I
think
need
I
this.
was gonna want to take a photo with it," which was so funny.
They got to
Um,
have their dreams come true, their little
they
visions come
did,
true.
and
Yeah.
it was just like everyone kind of had a little bit of a different experience there, which was so cool. And then another thing is we did the group surf lesson, which I thought not everyone would want to participate because surfing is very active. There is very little beginner luck. It's hard to like look cool and graceful when you're starting. And so I was like, I think people are just going to like opt out. And it was a tropical storm and it's actually like a really advanced place to surf. The place where we were was like really safe and easy, but as a whole, like there are a lot of good surfers here who still won't surf that area because it's intimidating. And everyone participated and everyone just went full in, leaned in and loved it. And we like laughed and it was amazing. That was probably my favorite part. And then we also did an impromptu like group coffee tasting, which I also loved. And I think the best part was our actual friends that we have in town participated in these things. It wasn't we were going to a different country and just like hiring tour guides. It was our friends who do it in town, which added a layer of like specialness and trust and safety on my end in the first retreat where I was like, okay, if something goes wrong, I have a lot of friends around me right now who can step in. And when the airport closed and the tropical storm was only picking up speed, my friends stepped in and helped coordinate transport to a different airport, help rebook. Like it would allow me to stay calm throughout the week, which I think was my biggest surprise is that with all of like the changes and like some of the things that didn't fully go according to plan, like the weather, I felt really calm.
I love that. It's so interesting because I feel like it's very rare. As you were talking and I was reliving the experience, it's so rare for hosts of a first event to be able to, one, I think, have an attendee who's also an event host. I'm thinking through and I'm like, as an attendee, I felt extra safe that these people were your friends. Like, I felt like we're in good hands. And like, I felt just like immediately at peace with my surroundings, knowing that you knew everyone there. Like, when you're like, let's go walk to this cafe, the owner of the cafe is my dear friend. And then the coffee roaster is my best friend. And he's going to take you through this lesson. And I was like, oh, cool. I don't have to have my guard up as a woman traveling alone with another woman in a foreign country. Like, which I mean, to be fair, I have done a lot of, but I know not a lot of people have. And even having done that, I know that my guard should be up. But being able to have that kind of chill feeling was so special. So I love that you said that. And then being able to relive it with you. The surfing, having an activity where people go out of their comfort zone is a risk, like every time. So I get that you felt that way. But as an attendee, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I 100% was planning on opting out. Like no part of me was going to
I was
surf.
expecting some people to. I mean, one of the girls, not you, but like one of the other girls on the trip does not like getting in water. But I was shocked when even she did it.
Because it's one of those things where like the environment is such that everyone felt safe together. And like I said at the beginning, it was challenging. And I think that is something that like is not an accident. So I wanted to bring that up because as we're talking about planning something that's maybe the first time you're doing it, we can shy away from pushing our attendees and pushing ourselves. And I think that that could be a mistake. I think there's like a balance, right? And the surfing was the perfect balance because, like you said, you knew these instructors, you knew the place, you knew the environment. And then we had been together for a few days before it happened. So I felt like, okay, I can look like a complete fool, which I did, and fall on my face, which I did. And I actually did pretty well. I'm not gonna lie. I actually like did a pretty good job. Surprisingly, because I would have thought I wouldn't have picked it up, but I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try, and I wouldn't have tried if it wasn't the right environment. And now I can't wait to do it again, kind of thing. So I love that you brought that up because you were able to take calculated risks and challenges, and the way they paid off was probably more than you even anticipated.
Yeah. In hindsight, this wasn't the intention. Well, I take that back. In some ways it was. And then I kind of got talked out of it. And then it ended up being exactly what my original kind of vision was, is that I wanted to recreate the experience I had been talking about in my newsletter of moving to Costa Rica. So it wasn't even like a business retreat, full stop offer. In a lot of ways, it was a retreat that I like intentionally created for people who are already following me to say, this thing that I've been telling you about, why don't you just come experience it? I've been talking about it for 2 years. Like, come learn how to surf, come see where I've been living, like, come recover from burnout the way that I did. And I was attempting to like recreate this thing that I had been talking about, which, understandably, I had been like very talked out of. Like, you can't recreate your life experiences for other people and think that it's in any way going to translate. And then in the end, it really did. So some of the things where it was like a risk or people are like, oh, I'm not really sure. I could with full confidence be like, no, you've got to do it. Like, trust me. You're going to be surprised with yourself. And I could say, trust me, because like, that's exactly how I felt. I did it anyways. It's exactly what I experienced. And it gave me confidence to stay the course.
Oh my gosh, I did not put that together until now, but that is 100% accurate because every story you told me, I was like, oh, I can relate to that now because I've done it, well, in a tiny, tiny portion of what you've done. But like for those watching, Kadie is a surfer now, and that coffee shop, that cafe, that amazing restaurant, she like frequents on a daily basis. Like I said, her friends are the owners. Before we hit record, I said, it's weird because I barely know you, but I intimately know your life, like having lived in it like in a tiny, tiny way. And that's really special. With that being said, I'd love to hear like to wrap up like your experience in the first iteration of your retreat now that you've lived it. I'd love to know like your highest highs and your lowest lows. Like what were the things that were like the good and the ugly? You know what I mean? Good, bad, ugly. Like give us a little bit of the tea.
I would say my highest highs were I truly loved watching everyone surf. Like that really was such a big thing for me because I came down to Costa Rica the first time and I had just gone through like such a hard year of business. I was so burned out with that. And I also, as soon as I got here, went through a massive breakup. So I was just like hit on all sides of like, what am I doing here? I don't want to be here. I don't know anybody and I just want to be with friends and family. And surfing is what healed my heart like completely. And so to see other women get to kind of let their guard down, try something new, be surprised with what they could actually be capable of in the ocean was so special. Like laughing together. I was like, I remembered it again. And that was really, really special to me. And then also I think the last night of dinner where we were all just kind of like recapping and talking gave me such an appreciation. I think because there were a lot of things that weren't 100% as planned, having your like gratitude and encouragement, but also realizing how much everyone brought to the table. Just, I don't think it could have been such a good experience with any other group. Like this was 100% the group it was meant to be. And I just felt like so poured into, so grateful, and also realizing that it's rare, I think, in some ways. I've gone to a few retreats where I'm like, this was really fun. I appreciated meeting everyone, but I don't really see us keeping in touch. We don't have enough in common. I looked around and I was like, I very much see everyone taking a friend out of this or like some community out of it. And like, that's very much been the experience, 2 months out is there's been still like so many conversations, so many voice notes, and I've loved that portion of it.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, I like you said, there's so much that's out of your control, and no matter what you're hosting, right? Like whether it's a small retreat, a giant conference, a workshop, whatever it is, there's always going to be something that even if it doesn't go wrong, like just is like the weather, the whatever it is. For oh my gosh, the last next level, I got vertigo and I had to host the first 2 days from bed. Like literally I had to have people step in for me and I had like the attendees in my bed because I couldn't lift my head. It was awful. I did my welcome talk with the IV in my arm. Like it was
Insane. That's insane.
and to be fair, for anyone listening, don't be scared of that. Like that I've been hosting retreats since 2013. This never happened until until
Yeah.
this year.
That's the thing is like it's so out of your control. And I would say my lowest low was the weather was tough because when we first heard hurricane tropical storm was touching on the Caribbean coast and we were going to get some ripples of it. And so the first 2 days were rainy, but it kept saying like it's going to clear up. So all week I thought this is the last day, this is the last day. And it just kept going. And then it was getting worse and worse. And then by the time the airport closed, and it wasn't closed due to weather, it was closed because of the severity of the storm. They had to redo the runway. I was like, this is like a level of outside of your control, but like it was truly next level. And I had this panic of no one wants to feel trapped, you know? And I didn't want to end on a note of people being like, vacation turned nightmare. And so I had a little bit of just fear that the experience was going to tank at the end when people didn't feel like they could get home. But also, I will say, like, another low point is it's not for everyone. And you have no control over who comes, but not only who comes, but what intention and expectation they're bringing to it. And it's very vulnerable to host a retreat in general. It's also super vulnerable to host a retreat in your home and to have anyone come and it be like not their jam. It makes it extra hard not to take it personally. And so I will say, I mean, I completely understand on so many levels why this one in particular would be not some people's jam because like the weather and it was just like a little bit different. It was very me, which is a little bit different. But I think it was one of those where it's like you either loved it or you hated it. And that's why I think there were such high highs and such low lows. But looking back, I mean, in the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I wish I could change the weather. I'm never doing this again in November. And now looking back, I'm like, that was perfect. That's exactly what it needed to be. And I, in hindsight, would change nothing.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, that's education too, right? Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but for me and for what I teach with my students is always if you're going to step in the role of leadership, of education, there is a massive responsibility on you as the educator, but there's also a responsibility of the student, the attendee, the client, the customer to look at what they're investing in. And both sides need to make sure it's a good fit. And that's why I think it makes it easier for you as an educator when you're selling to understand that. This is why I get mad when people let people sign up for things they shouldn't, because I'm like, you should be honest and say, like, this is for you if X, Y, and Z. It's not for you if X, Y, and Z. And then it's also on the purchaser to know what they're getting into. Now, again, in my perspective, as the plus one, I did no research. I was like, I'm excited to go support my friend and be with her in this. And so it was out of my comfort zone. A lot of the sessions Addison led were a lot of like reflection and feelings and life coaching. And I am kind of feeling avoidant sometimes, especially when it comes to business. I keep it very separate. But hey, I was there. So like I knew that it was my responsibility as the student. And again, this is easier for me because I teach education. So I'm like, well, I know that I have a responsibility as the student to open up and to like do the best I can in the situation, not to be like a star student, but like to like get something out of it, right? So I left with something out of it. But if you're not going to do that, it does make it hard to leave feeling like that was solid. So it's twofold.
For sure. For sure. And I will say, like, having you there was such a huge highlight as well, because there were some moments where I was like, is this the right call? And I'd look over and you're like, yeah. Yeah, that was the right call. You did good.
I'm like unsolicited nodding.
And I was like, okay, Laylee's in agreement. Like, we're good to go. And it was so funny because we did not know each other before the retreat. There was such instant connection and instant trust that I really felt like I had an ally throughout the whole week with like things shifting. And it's funny too, because had I known ahead of time, I would have gotten in my head. I never would have hosted the retreat if I like knew everything that could go wrong. And now, I have a ton of data and experience to vet differently, knowing what it is and like having actually experienced it and like, oh, okay, this is actually the kind of person that needs to come. And like, this is how we need to like, market it, which is exactly how the first time you put anything out, part of it is creating it. And the other part is people experiencing it. And you don't fully understand it until at least somebody's experienced it and can give you feedback. So that was like the first retreat for sure. But it was funny because I'm a designer, so aesthetics are so important. So I'm like, of course, some people were going to come thinking I'm going to get a ton of social media content out of this and it's going to be like perfectly beautiful. And then they come and it's like a storm and reflective and like more of identity work. I was like, oh yeah, well, if you saw my Instagram account or like saw the design work I put out, of course that would be the expectation. I can't, fault that at all.
Yeah. Or being like, wow, I'm really in nature, but like she makes everything so beautiful that I thought I would be like, I don't know, like not
Yeah, like in a like postcard version or like the fully edited version. Yeah.
exactly. I imagined everything like beautifully filtered. And then I got there and I was like, oh, it's nature.
Yeah. And I think in some ways that's what I actually loved was the takeaways that it was this sense of like, oh, yeah, like aspects of your life are beautiful and aspects of your life are totally normal, like totally ordinary, not perfect, not, a complete filter. And I think in some ways that I hoped that it was like the takeaway. I was like, oh, okay, this isn't this aspirational, unattainable, perfect life. And there's stuff to appreciate about that too. Like anyone's life is like a combination of beauty and incredible things and the ordinary day to day.
So true. That's so true. As we wrap up, I'd love to hear like any last thoughts you want to share with everyone about just kind of like if you could go back and tell yourself when you were planning the first round or thinking about hosting it, what's the last thing that you would tell yourself if you could go back in time?
Oh, if I could go back in time, I think I probably would have told myself, don't try to be the perfect host. Like be part of the experience too. I think that it was once I finally accepted that there were going to be aspects of it that went according to plan and aspects that didn't. And I accepted it. I kind of let my guard down and leaned in a little bit more halfway through the week. And that's when it became amazing. And I think that if I had released that pressure earlier and even before, I would have saved myself a lot of anxiety and thinking that everything had to be perfect for people to have a good time and realize that these are just other humans and me showing up and just genuinely caring for people from like a sincere place is all that's needed. Like perfect isn't needed. Thoughtfulness and consideration is.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. I could not agree more. That was amazing. It almost makes me like want to end there, but we have to end with the unpopular opinion because it's like 5 years strong. I can't not do it. But that was so beautifully said. And I couldn't agree more with that. I feel like that's just something that we just overthink. And so we don't think about like the heart of it. And I think oh, that was beautiful. Okay. So what is your unpopular opinion about hosting a retreat?
Okay. So I would say my unpopular opinion is like host it in your home, like host it in your space because like we were talking before the episode, you have so much context into my life now. Like it's so much easier to share stories and feel understood and seen now that you've seen my life and my friends and the coffee shop I go to work and where my favorite restaurant is. And it was amazing to share my life, not just a retreat experience, but also my life with the people that I've been talking to for 10 years in business. I think that that is no matter where you live or where you're from, people are following you because of your lived experience. And I think inviting anyone into your space is just like a greater level of intimacy and it's fun. It's really fun. So I would recommend that. Keep it easy.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
go
keep it
home.
easy is so good. It's so funny because I think about all the time, like I could never, I mean, never say never, but for the foreseeable future, I don't see myself ever hosting the Creative Educator Conference anywhere but Dallas because I have my people here as like that support. And also my parents came to my conference. Like people met my parents. Like that was fun. But you live in Costa Rica, which is incredible. So like that makes sense, but I never would have thought to like to surround people with my everyday life is something that maybe I'll have to think about doing.
It's actually so nice. And I've thought back on some of the retreats I've gone to, and I've gone on them because I really love and admire the host and their life. And if I had gotten to like meet their people, their friends, their families, see where they live, I think it would have added an extra layer of buy-in and loyalty into the whole experience. And it was like unintentional. I just knew that people wanted to come to Costa Rica. So like, oh, this is, low hanging fruit. But now I'm realizing like, I'm so glad you know my friends.
I know, me too. That's so great. So are you going to do it again?
Yeah. Yeah. So this year we were going to host some more, but then we got engaged instead. So I will be planning the ultimate hosting retreat, which is my wedding here. And I think we're probably, I mean, things can always change, but most likely going to take a year off from the retreat and then come back in 2026 with a couple more.
I love that so much. Well, everybody keep an eye out. Where can people actually like keep an eye? Probably on Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram, kind of. I would say the best way is the Sunday edition. That's where I tell stories from Costa Rica and share a lot of like personal photos and anecdotes. And that's kind of where people fell in love with the place in my experience in it to begin with. So I would say subscribe to the Sunday edition.
Amazing. And we can link that in our show notes for sure, but can people get to it from dropcapdesign.com?
Yes, it's like right at like the top banner. So you can't miss it. And that's really where you're going to get all the good stuff.
Amazing. I know everyone's going to be excited to look into that. If I can surf, people are probably like, what? Lately went surfing. I'm going to this retreat. So definitely keep an eye out for the next retreat that Kadie hosts. And of course, like you're such a fun follow as well. Thank you so much for sharing like the real behind the scenes. It's so easy to put out just the beautiful stuff and not want to talk about like the nitty gritty of it. But I feel like the people who listen to this podcast really want to know like, what am I in for if I do this? So I appreciate it.
Thank
You're
you.
the best. Thanks, friend. All right, you guys, we'll catch you on next week's episode of So Here's the Thing. And if you plan on hosting a retreat or an event, like let us know. Tag us on Instagram, send us an email. Let us know if this episode helps you. And I'll catch you guys next week.